Engage.
Hello everyone, Jay Warden here, and welcome to my recap and review of the episode The End is the Beginning, where the plot finally starts to crawl along and Picard starts assembling his new crew. Remember, there will be many spoilers ahead for this and other Trek series, otherwise, enjoy. We begin this episode much like the last with another flashback to 14 years ago where a slightly de-aged Picard, also known as JL, has just come back from a meeting with Starfleet Command, who were chewing him out for wanting to continue the evacuation of the Romulans after Mars got wrecked by the androids, and here we establish that Raffi was his right-hand woman. Despite his best efforts, Picard failed to convince his fellow admirals, and after giving an ultimatum regarding their continued support for his endeavours or his resignation, they chose to accept his resignation. Having put a lot of work into this, Raffi gets rather pissed off about this because it means she'll probably get fired too, so she storms off. Back in the present day of Raffi's little hobble in the desert, we learn that she spent the last 14 years drinking and vaping her way down the rabbit hole of anger and despair, and rips Picard a new one for apparently not even giving a shit about her after everything that's happened, and then suddenly turning up out of the blue asking for a ship. Picard starts trying to apologise, but Raffi is having none of it and storms off. Again. But this time Picard's not going to let it go and starts following her. Over on the Borg cube we're reintroduced to Hugh, who seems to have deborgified himself a bit since the last time we saw him and is now the director of this reclamation project, and is curiously watching Soji talk to the dead Borg from the last episode in this language. He moses on over and compliments her work and the ability to speak to unknown dead aliens, and then says he's finally decided to grant her request to speak to an ex-Borgified Romulan named Ramda, who according to Soji was apparently the foremost expert on ancient Romulan myths, which Soji think might be useful in finding a shared mythical framework as a therapeutic method of recovery for the psychologically damaged ex-Borgs. So Hugh agrees to let her have 30 minutes as an experiment. Back in the desert, Raffi is drinking straight from the bottle when Picard finally catches up with her and apologises for being a neglectful dick towards her, before going on to explain about the Zhat Vash operatives openly hunting synths on Earth and thinks they can't be doing this without support from within Starfleet somewhere. Raffi claims she has evidence that a high-ranking Starfleet official, supported by the Tal Shiar, allowed the attack on Mars to happen in order to stop the rescue efforts, though Picard doesn't understand why they'd want to sabotage efforts to save their own people. But Raffi insists she's pretty damn good at seeing conspiracies where he can't. Because she was awesome at her job, Picard tries to convince her to come with him and help, but she refuses, gets upset again, and demands he fuck off immediately, though just before he goes says she found him a pilot called Chris Rios, who will soon be in touch. So for the next few minutes we get a collection of quick scenes including Dr. Jurati getting a visit from her sunglasses wearing Commodore O, complete with wonky rank pips, Raffi doing some research with Picard sending her all the data he has on Bruce Maddox, finding some interesting Gorn Easter eggs along the way, and then back on the cube, Hugh takes Soji to a secure area filled with a bunch of ex-Borgified Romulans who are all severely damaged psychologically from their assimilation into the collective, also called the Disordered, where we find Ramda, who seems to be doing some sort of Romulan version of tarot cards. As promised though, Picard seems to have gotten in contact with Rios and beams aboard his ship where he's greeted by an EMH who takes him to a shirtless, cigar-smoking, whiskey-drinking Rios with a piece of metal sticking out of his shoulder. What is it with these new characters drinking and smoking all the time? Rios seems to have some bitterness towards Starfleet, but Picard thinks he knows just what kind of man Rios is just by looking at how spick and span his ship is, claiming he's still Starfleet to the core. Rios though isn't interested in being psychoanalyzed by the great Picard and tells him to either hire him or fuck off, and instead is psychoanalyzed in private by his ENH program, who tries to give Rios a pep talk and convincing him to help Picard because he's really a decent sort of chap. Rios though is still bitter about the time the last great hero of a captain he had his brain splattered all over a bulkhead, before Starfleet erased his ship and crew from the records and so angrily deactivates the ENH before continuing to have a good brood in his chair, staring out into the black wistfully. Joining him in that wistful stare into the black is Picard back at his chateau and laments to Laris that though he'll miss her, Jabana number 1, he won't miss the chateau and has never felt truly at home there because what he's really missed is being in a spaceship going on various adventures. Just as Shaban comes in with some groceries for Picard to take with him, they're all suddenly attacked. In a series of quick camera cuts designed to give us all whiplash, we're treated to a fight where Laris and Shaban show off their old Tal Shiar skills, and though they manage to defeat most of the attackers, they're almost killed when they're saved at the last minute by a terrified Dr. Jurati, who in a nice dramatic coincidence arrives out of nowhere. Luckily for them though, they manage to capture one of the attackers this time, and as they secure him in a chair, Jurati explains that Commodore O wanted to know why she was talking to Picard and admitted she told her everything except one thing. Before he can ask what though, their prisoner wakes up and they begin an interrogation. It's here we start intercutting between the chateau and the cube as Soji talks with Ramda, trying to understand what she's doing with the cards and if they're connected to some kind of mythology. Ramda doesn't like this word though and says it's more like the news, with Soji commenting that she likes this idea because it gives our ex-Borgs a shared narrative to cope with their trauma that's as relevant as the day's news, which really sounds like a whole lot of bullshit to me. Ramda finally takes a good look at Soji and says she knows her from tomorrow, confusing both me and Soji. Soji then presses on and tells Ramda she's special because she and the others in the room were on the very last ship to be assimilated by the cube, surprising Hugh, who had no idea that this was the case. Soji keeps pushing, wanting to know what caused the cube to fail when Ramda starts babbling, asking Soji if she's the one who lives or dies, showing the last card she has to be one of twins before freaking out, grabbing a guard's disruptor and screaming that Soji is the destroyer. And in the chateau, the Romulan assassin says the exact same thing, and that Picard will never find Soji before they do. And after having given them a potentially vital if cryptic clue, decides now's the perfect time to melt himself into green goo. Ramda then also tries to kill herself, but Soji rushes over at superhuman speed, disarms her, and it seems for now the situation has been calmed, though all the other ex-Borg Romulans are looking at Soji suspiciously. So she does what any scared person might do and calls her mum up, asking if her twin Daj is okay. But just like the last time we saw this alleged mother, something odd happens, and after rambling about Daj getting a puppy, bores Soji to sleep, only waking up later to Narek coming in to see if she's okay. She remains a little freaked out about having this sudden information about the assimilated Romulan ship, but hopes Narek still wants to go out with her all the same. Narek simply responds by saying he thinks he's falling in love with her. But it seems his sister Rizzo has finally arrived on the cube, out of her Starfleet cover and giving off a creepy, almost incestual vibe. The two have a chat about Soji, how she has no idea what she really is, and that given what happened with Daj on Earth, it's probably best to keep it that way. Rizzo reluctantly seems to agree and tells Narek to try and not fall in love with her. Yeah, good luck with that. Back at the chateau, Jurati explains the thing that she didn't tell Commodore O was that she's going with Picard and that he'll need her expertise in finding Soji, as well as not wanting to pass up the opportunity to study her. Rios meanwhile contacts Picard telling him he's good to go, but a source of his has told him things have gotten pretty hot and that they really need to leave right now. So Picard and Jurati beam aboard and find that Rios' source is none other than Raffi, who's coming along for the ride to a place called Free Cloud, where she thinks Maddox may be hiding, but says she's not joining the mission, only going along so she can get to Free Cloud herself without explaining why. So with all aboard and ready to go, Picard gives us a classic engage and the plot finally starts moving. Well, we're 3 episodes in now, and I'm still just thinking, this is okay? Just okay? Not great, not bad, not wowing me in any significant way, and it has some entertainment value, but unlike Discovery at least, hasn't severely annoyed or irritated me yet beyond some mild concerns and things I'm not a fan of in a nitpicky nerd sort of way. It would be nice though if they stopped with all the clunky exposition many characters keep dumping on us. I think they're just better storytelling ways to impart information to the audience in my opinion. I guess I should say I'm kind of viewing this in 2 minds. For the most part, during my first viewings anyway, I'm really trying to step back from my usual Trek nerdy nitpicking and simply trying to enjoy it as a sci-fi show with my girlfriend who is not a Trekkie. I mean, I've only just got her into DS9 as Trek series go and I had to work hard on that. She though, like me, is describing things so far as not bad, not great, just generally okay and entertaining enough for now with the hope that it's going to lead somewhere interesting and good. However, on my second viewing, as I start to analyse and dissect, my nerdiness starts taking over, picking out more flaws and issues that don't necessarily match up with my expectations of a Star Trek show. I do really want to like this show, and so far, as I said, I like this show much better than Discovery and any of the new Trek films, but it's still got some way to go before it matches up with any of the more classic series for me. I understand this season has been described as a 10-hour movie with a 3-act structure, and so we should at least now be through the first act of establishing settings and characters, info dumping, and getting the plot ready to go, and I'm really hoping things do become more interesting. As far as the plot goes, things are starting to take shape enough for people to start formulating all sorts of ideas and theories as mysterious hints are dropped about the nature of Soji as well as why this particular Borg cube failed in the way it did. And I think I'll talk about this first as it does contain elements I find both intriguing and concerning. It does seem like we're getting a build-up to some sort of big revelation about the Romulan species as a whole by examining their ancient mythology, the Zhat Vash's hatred of artificial life, and the implication that the only known Romulans to ever be assimilated by the Borg caused the attacking cube into some sort of collapse, and given all this stuff about realistic flesh and blood androids, my own thoughts have started to wonder how the Vulcans might factor into this. Is this implication that the Romulan species is actually some kind of synthetic lifeform or descendants of those lifeforms in some fashion, created initially by the Vulcans? Or did the Romulans do something akin to Battlestar Galactica in creating flesh and blood androids themselves to help build their society when they left Vulcan, which then rebelled and nearly wiped them out, thus causing this hatred? Or is it something completely unrelated? As long as it's not something utterly stupid like they're the original creators of the Borg or something, because I would fucking hate that. As far as we know in established lore, the Romulans are a species offshoot of the Vulcans who, some 2,000 years before the events of modern Star Trek, started to embrace the ideology of logic and rejecting emotions as taught by Surak. A minority of Vulcans rejected this new ideology and left the planet to later settle on the twin worlds of Romulus and Remus. Because they never accepted logic, the Romulans remained a very passionate, aggressive people like the Vulcans of old, and eventually grew into what would become the Romulan Star Empire. Beyond this though, Star Trek never really delved much into the history of the Romulans, simply content for the most part to show them as shadowy bad guys who like to scheme, plot, and otherwise manipulate things to advance the interests of the Empire. The closest we ever got to seeing Romulan society outside of the usual military types we saw was in the two-parter TNG episode Unification. Here we see some politics of the Empire and how the general citizenry lives in a state of oppression, with the eyes of the state always watching for dissenters and traitors. The destruction of the Romulans' home system and nearby colonies from the supernova's radiation has been a great way, I think, to really shake up the Romulan culture and allow us to examine it in more detail since the Empire collapsed, and I appreciate this attempt at lore building for them. This also clarifies something that I was unsure about before and makes better sense in terms of the sheer scale of the evacuations needed, as it wasn't just Romulus that needed evacuating but all the neighbouring systems as well, which makes total sense given the resulting gamma rays would be devastating to habitable worlds. Taking into account multiple populated worlds across various star systems, that really exacerbates the scale of the task involved in evacuating countless numbers away to safety. Going back to the issue of the cube and assimilated Romulans though, what concerns me is Soji's role in all of this, with both Ramda and the captured assassin excitedly saying she's the destroyer or the end of all, as well as Ramda's little tarot card showing the twin sisters, seemingly knowing that one has died and one lives, and some cryptic comment about having met her tomorrow, implying a possible time travel element as well. If there's one thing that really annoys me about modern Star Trek, it's the constant use of an epic doomsday scenario that threatens Earth, the entire Federation, or even the whole galaxy. I speculated in my review of the first episode, Remembrance, about the possible differences between Dahj and Soji, wondering if they might go as far as to have a data lore angle here with one being good and the other being evil. This could be some misdirection of course, but her being the destroyer and end of all is not exactly a good sign for her going forward to me. Another thing I speculated on was Dahj's mother not being real or possibly some sort of AI program, and here we get another conversation with this alleged mother which further reinforces this idea as she happily goes on about how well Dahj is doing, causing Soji to fall asleep. While it doesn't confirm if she's a real person or not, my bet is that it's definitely a program to keep both sisters within their established identities and perhaps whatever ulterior motives might be behind them. I must admit to being very confused about this shared mythology business that Soji goes on about, as well as this idea that the Romulans see it like the news. I just didn't really get it or understand it, even on a repeat viewing of the episode, so I'm just kinda left scratching my head wondering what this nonsense is all about. All I really took from the scenes with Ramda and the other ex-Borg Romulans is that their assimilation understandably screwed them up psychologically, that they somehow recognise what Soji might be and are implied to have directly caused this submatrix collapse of the cube upon their assimilation. And once again, as far as Soji goes, she's still not really impressing me as a character or really even getting that much characterization, and I think I'd go as far to say as I find her the weakest character so far. We do get some tidbits here and there. I mean, she's got an expertise in anthropology and she can somehow access restricted records regarding the fate of these ex-Borg Romulans, but otherwise there's just nothing particularly defining or interesting to me about the character. We just know that she's an android with a mysterious agenda, and that she's just basically the central plot point everyone is either running towards or fighting over. I definitely got a kick out of seeing Hugh again though. It's been 30 years in-universe since we last encountered him after the TNG crew freed both him and his fellow ex-Borg from the clutches of Data's evil brother Lore, and it looks like he's done pretty well for himself, though many questions remain on what exactly he's been doing these past 30 years, and how he got himself named as the director of the Romulans Reclamation Project. There's still an alien air to his performance at times, and it's clear he's had a hard time integrating with others at least because of how people view the Borg in general, but I really hope to learn more about what he's been up to as the series progresses. Elsewhere, we learnt a lot about Raffi and her past relationship to Picard via clunky expositional dialogue, and we got introduced to Rios, the captain of the La Serena, who will take Picard on his new adventure to find Soji. Both characters are portrayed as either broken or cynical people with less than fond memories of how Starfleet has treated them in the past, both with a penchant for smoking, vaping, or drinking. I know some people don't like the smoking, drinking aspects. I don't have too much of an issue with it. The cigar maybe seems a little out of place for a time when past treks have always given us the impression people generally don't do that sort of thing anymore, but honestly, even in this enlightened era of humanity, I would never buy that we are so far advanced or enlightened that people no longer fall back on various addictive vices if they get into a bad place in their lives or as a coping mechanism, be it through drugs, drinking, or other things. I would, however, expect there to be much better mental health support to help people like this in need. I mean, we do put counsellors on every starship in this era. First off with Raffi, it seems she was Picard's right hand in the efforts to spearhead the rescue efforts for the Romulans and served as his main security advisor as well. As a result of him resigning from Starfleet, it appears the Admiralty decided to fire her as well, but I was just left wondering why she wasn't simply reassigned somewhere else, but I guess since Mars was totally wrecked, the shipyards and rescue fleets destroyed, they may have just wanted to make sure people were blamed and took the fall for it. I'm also not sure why she's been forced to live out in the desert for the past 14 years in a shitty little abode, even pointing out the magnified difference in living standards between Picard's elegant, posh chateau versus her little hovel in the desert. I never got the impression in the past that Earth had any kind of housing problem like this anymore. I mean, it's been stated many times how Earth is a paradise.
On Earth, there is no poverty, no crime, no war. You look out the window of Starfleet headquarters and you see paradise.
And people generally don't want for material things like they do in our century. Could she not have easily moved somewhere else in the Federation or its many colonies to start a new life over? I suppose getting fired and essentially being abandoned by someone who you serve so loyally, perhaps even a father figure to you, would be enough to screw anyone up emotionally that she simply wanted to withdraw as far as possible. Otherwise, as far as her performance goes, it's mostly fine so far, but nothing particularly distinctive or interesting about the character other than she likes to drink and is apparently very good at finding conspiracies or other hidden pieces of information. However, like many characters so far, she has a habit of dropping lots of clunky exposition, and I really don't care for her calling Picard JL. It just doesn't sound like the sort of shorthand familiarity Picard would ever have allowed in the past. Rios, on the other hand, I found potentially more interesting as a character, depending on what they do with him in the future. I was expecting a more Han Solo type character here, but instead it felt a lot more like Malcolm Reynolds from Firefly. Though right now he's mostly a walking cliche, a former military career officer who had some bad experiences and now is a jaded and cynical individual, leading a solo life as a freelancer, taking jobs where he can. In this case, a former Starfleet officer who had some bad times in the past that is cryptically alluded to but never delved into much, which I actually liked given how much exposition our characters like to dump on us all the time. He's flippant, dismissive, and casual, but also comes across as someone more intellectual and potentially very capable at programming given he has 2 emergency holograms helping him run the ship. I really liked this aspect of continuity, that emergency holograms have become very commonplace now, but I find it curious that he would program them with his likeness but give them different accents. I'm just saying, if I could program my own EMH, I'd probably not use my own likeness, instead creating something random like RPG games allow you to do when you create your character. I do wonder though about the distinction between sentient holograms and androids for Starfleet given they've banned all physically based synthetics. Holograms have proven in the past that they can be very dangerous, perhaps even more so than androids in some cases because of their ability to become intangible to harm should they choose, and of course being literal computer programs can easily infiltrate such systems, but they are more limited in their mobility since they need holo emitters to function on a physical level. The only thing I didn't get with Rios was why he had that piece of shrapnel in his shoulder. There's no indication of how that happened, and there seemed to be no point in it other than to show us that he had several emergency holograms on the ship, and maybe to give the ladies some eye candy to look at too, I guess. His ship isn't particularly impressive design-wise, very angular and blocky, somewhat generic, and not particularly cool looking, lacking the traditional pleasing curves of many Federation designed ships. I'm assuming it's just a civilian ship of some sort, or perhaps something from another race, but maybe time will tell and we'll get some more background on where the ship came from. Jurati continues to be largely adorable in the way she's portrayed, though her showing up in the last minute with a disruptor in hand saving the day was a little too much. I'm not sure I'd buy that she would be that brave to pick up a disruptor rifle and get involved in a fight, especially considering her reaction afterwards, but whatever, nice dramatic timing I guess. To be fair, I've heard it suggested that Jurati is now actually working for O and is acting as a spy for her so she can follow what Picard is up to, but honestly I don't really buy that. Jurati has come across as far too honest and earnest in her portrayal, and I just don't see her even being that good a spy, even if she has been co-opted. But I guess we'll find out soon enough. I suppose I should quickly comment on Commodore O wearing sunglasses here, as I know many people are talking about it. I'll only say this, I found it a bit jarring, and if it turns out she is a Vulcan, then I will actually have a real problem with it, because this is very firmly established in lore that Vulcans can easily tolerate brightness due to a set of inner eyelids having evolved on a desert-like planet.
You'd better protect your eyes from the glare.
My inner eyelids will protect my vision.
However, I suspect she's actually a Romulan, and despite being a species offshoot of the Vulcans, they've been separated long enough potentially for Romulans to not have the same ability to tolerate high levels of brightness. The other potential explanation here is that she's from the Mirror Universe, given Discovery told us people from there have less tolerance for it. I really hope this isn't the case, because I've had quite enough of the Mirror Universe. It's fine to go there as a standalone adventure, but I just don't like it being used as a major plot point. Just leave it alone, please. The fight scene in Picard's chateau I actually largely enjoyed this time because I was genuinely concerned for Loris and Zhaban. As I mentioned in Maps and Legends, these two have fast become my favourites of the new characters introduced so far, and that's reinforced here as we see both of them quickly fall back on their Tal Shiar training to defend Picard. Fight scenes for the sake of it are boring unless stylistically done in an interesting way, but for a fight scene to have any real impact, the stakes have to matter, and I have to believe that there can be real consequences to it with people I care about. I'm still not enjoying the fight choreography all that much, with again far too much quick-paced camera cuts and edits and lots of shaky cam unsteady footage. I mean, just give us a chance to breathe, take in the action and see what's going on instead of giving us a visual whiplash. Later, as they interrogate their prisoner, I'm left wondering why the guy just didn't commit suicide straight away once he realised he was captured. But no, we have to give our characters a vital cryptic clue first and then commit suicide. It also feels like O dropped the ball herself here by ordering a very sloppy attack on Picard. And I presume it's her, given Jurati told her everything and the previous episode said she'd deal with Picard herself. What happened to just beaming in and quickly killing everyone before they can react? Sloppy work, Commodore. As a side note, I like the little mention of the differences in Romulan's facial structures with the comment about the assassin being a northerner. It's a nice little touch that just helps to flesh out and diversify the Romulans as a race more. Races in Star Trek are too often portrayed as a race of hats, that is to say that they all look the same, wear the same clothes, have the same hairstyles and generally behave the same. It's quite rare to see a race that's as diverse as our own depicted in other species, so yeah, I liked this. Finally, I have to say that though I found Patrick Stewart to be great in the past two episodes, this episode his performance fell somewhat off to me at times, most notably in his conversation with Rios, and I think it's maybe just the old man voice again that's bothering me, or at least its tone and pacing. It felt too slow, stilted, and nothing compared to other Picard speeches I've heard in the past. I did however like the subtle de-aging on him during the opening flashback, and I also really liked these earlier uniforms they depict, continuing the great tradition of Starfleet constantly changing its uniform designs every few years. So there we go, almost a third of the way through the series, and the plot has finally started moving forward, so I'm really hoping the next episode steps things up a bit, so please do join me next week for my recap and review of the episode Absolute Candor. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, then also check out my other reviews, and if you haven't yet, please do like, subscribe and share. Until next time, this is Jay Warden, signing off.